Welcome to the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast, where we hope to inspire you to embrace your God-given gifts, skills, and passions in order to lead with confidence. I'm your host, Esther Littlefield, a pastor's wife, business owner, mom, and writer. My co-host is Holly Kane, and together we chat about important issues that Christian women leaders face. In addition, we interview other women just like you who lead in various roles, from church to community to business. Through this podcast, we offer you encouragement, tools, and resources to help you on your leadership journey. We're so glad you're here with us. Hello and welcome to today's conversation. I am here today with Holly and our guest, Breshana Miller. So we are super excited to hear from you today, Breshana, and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate being here.
Breshana, I'd love to start with you just telling us about how you are currently leading in your life. What does your life look like right now?
What my life looks like right now. Wow, it's like a hodgepodge, right? But so I have a lot of things, going on. And of course, by the grace of God, I'm able to, still do what I've been called to do. And so just to kind of start out leading my life, I have my family. I have 3 small little kids, so, I have to, stay present with them. I have 8, 7, and 2.5-year-old. So, that's a lot right there as far as, I'm a mom. So I consider myself a mom coach, like my son doesn't realize and my daughter, like they don't realize, like, you've got the best coach ever called mom, right?
I love that.
So, yeah, I'm like, they don't realize, of course they look at me weird, give me the third eye or whatever. But I'm like, trust me, you'll know this like 20 years from now. Like everything I'm telling you really does matter.
Yeah.
So yeah, in my home, having that leadership role as far as, leading and training my children. So that's really important to me. And then also in the ministry as well. So those are the first 2 priorities in my life, of course, is my family. And then in the ministry, my husband is a pastor, so I lead alongside him. I am not a pastor. Just want to make sure that's clear. I'm not a pastor, but I do lead alongside him in the ministry with teaching and, of course, just helping to nurture the people that God has assigned, to our ministry. So that's a lot in and of itself, because we deal with people from all different walks of life. As you all know, we get people from everywhere who has all sorts of problems. So it's definitely that's a challenge, but God gives us the grace to do it when we submit to Him and allow Him to really be the one who is doing the growing and not myself. So I lead in that area. And then also myself, because, I believe that one of the highest forms of leadership is self-leadership. It's self-discipline. And so while I'm constantly, standing before others, I think the biggest form of leadership is what you do with yourself in private. Right? Because what you do in private is also going to be reflected what you do on the outside. So that is having a self-discipline within myself and having the right people in my life, having the right mentors in my life so that I'm staying accountable, and having people who can also help me and guide me, because I believe that's important. Every leader needs a leader. Every trainer needs a trainer. Every mentor needs a mentor. So, God didn't put us on this earth to kind of do it solo, So it's having the right people in my circle so that I can lead more effectively as well. Then, of course, in my business, I am also an entrepreneur. And so I'm constantly leading in that space as well, and basically helping other women learn how they can step up and be, a leader, not just in their life, but also in their business, be the influencer, the change agent that God has called them to be. So that's basically what my life sort of looks like when it comes to leadership.
Yeah. So you have your business, you have your kids, your husband, and your ministry. And then do you work outside of that as well?
So I do work outside of the home. I have a corporate career, so been in the marketplace for quite a while, actually. And so I do that, and I also have a leadership role in on my job as well, which has been very gratifying. I have to say, I know some people say like, "Oh, I hate my job," and I honestly just can say I've been blessed and have been blessed with opportunities that have allowed me to grow and actually, operate as the leader that God has called me to be too. So yes, I do work as well.
Okay.
So many great things that you said, and I'm so excited to dig into every single one of them. But can you tell us when you think your first leadership experience began, when you really thought you were a leader?
In retrospect, I realized that this was the pivot point in my life where I was becoming a leader, but I really didn't know it then because I was freaking out more so than realizing what was happening.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. And I was a lot younger too. So, not as mature just to understand what was actually taking place, because sometimes we encounter these moments and we don't realize what God is doing in that present moment until we look back and we're like, oh, wow, like that's what that was. So I was in the military. And so I had just recently had been promoted, and there was basically, a long story short, is they were standing up a new team that had been dissolved for quite a while. And one of my chiefs just pulled on me and was like, Sergeant Johnson, you're going to be the team lead. And I was looking at him like, what? Like, I don't know what I'm doing. I was like, I don't even know what I'm doing, But he had that trust and that confidence in me because I've been working with him for a while. So he saw something in me that I didn't see, that I didn't know, but I was put to the task. Like, and in the military, it's not like I had a choice. Right. I couldn't say, let me think about it, right? So when they say you're going, we call it being voluntold. Like, we don't volunteer, we're voluntold. So I was voluntold that I'm going to stand up this new team and I'm going to lead it. So of course, I have to do what my leadership told me to do. Mm-hmm. And the challenging part for me there were peers, that I had been promoted over. And so I had to now function as a leader over people who were once my peers. So not only did I not know what I was doing, I was also now having to stand as a leader over people that I was once parallel to. You know what I mean? And so that was the pivotal moment in my life where leadership began to happen. And it all unfolded actually very well, but it was just in that moment when my name came up and they're like, you're going to do this. And I just instantly freaked out because, I had high expectations. I have high standards for myself even back then. And I didn't want to fail. I didn't want to make mistakes, honestly, and like in front of my peers. I didn't want to have that perception. So I just really put like a lot of weight and anxiety on myself unnecessarily. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment when leadership actually began to hold in my life. But again, it took me a while to realize that at that moment. Yeah.
Okay. So can you tell us what were some of the leadership lessons that you learned through that experience, specifically through your experience in the military?
Yeah. So one of the biggest lessons in the military that I learned, and it's something that they teach everyone, it is so true, is that as a leader, you have to learn how to be selfless, because a leader is not really about you. It's about the people that you lead. And of course, in the military, we're constantly making sacrifices, for our family, for our country. And so being selfless was a value, that they instilled in us, that, you have to always be looking out for the person to your left and to your right. And helping them, because the team is only as strong as the weakest link, right? And so it's not about you, the leader being like the smartest one, but it's about helping everyone. And even the person who may not be the quickest, the swiftest, that as a leader, it's our role to even help them come along because we all need each other. And
Right.
so that was one of the biggest lessons. And I carry that with me even to this day because it's a life lesson. It's not a military lesson. It's a life lesson. So that was one thing that I took from it. And most of all, I would say that personally, it's just about caring about the people you work with as well, because you never know what a person is going through. And sometimes as leaders, we delegate, we like to execute. I'm the kind of person I like to execute. I like to delegate and just want to get it done. I'm a get it done kind of person. And there are times when I would get frustrated or whatever, maybe something's not happening when when it should happen. And I think the lesson for me was you have to take time to understand before we judge or come to these quick conclusions about something, whether the person's right or wrong. There has to be the need to want to understand whether they're right or wrong. And that's where the growth takes place. That's where the connection can take place. That's where you can build trust in the people that you lead. Because when you take time to at least understand, how did this happen? What was going on? Just get inside that person's head. Then it allows you as the leader to lead them better because then you've learned them. So leadership is also learning the people, not just leading the people, but learning the people, because the more you know about them, then the better you can mentor them, the better you can teach them, So that's what I learned as well, just personally, is that you have to be willing to take time to learn and understand the people.
I love that. And I think that the more that you show the people that you're leading, that you're willing to learn about them and that you're willing to understand them, the more loyalty and the more passion that they'll have for the team as well. So I love that. It really makes a great basis for that leader volunteer or leader employee or whatever the nature of that relationship is, but it makes a really great foundation for that. So I love that. Can you talk a little bit about the transition from military into ministry, kind of that timeline, what that looked like?
Right. So after the military, I went into my career, went to the corporate sector and began to work. I was in the church, then. I wasn't married then, but I honestly have to say that from military to ministry it's a radical transition. And
I bet.
it's pretty radical. For me, it was pretty radical. And I would say that now, I tell people even in my church today that the military is really the Bible in action. It truly is. It's the Bible in action because there's so many things that we were taught, in basic training and just, preparing, when you have to get deployed. There's so many things that we're taught that is in the Bible, which is why, Paul referred to, fighting and warfare and, having armor and all these things, because it's really like being in the military.
Yeah.
And so I learned that, that basically the military is just the Bible in reality. It's the Bible in action. At the same time, the radical transition from military to ministry was more of a mindset change, because the military, again, there are no options, right? You don't get to choose, right? Mm-hmm. We tell you what to do. The military you are told what to do. The decisions are not made on the lower level. They're made up on the higher level. And they teach that even if your leadership tells you do something, the way you communicate the task is you don't say, my officer said. No, you give the command like it's coming directly from you, right? And so having that kind of understanding and way of communicating and then trying to go, of course, you see where I'm going with this, right? And then going into ministry where, okay, people have options. Matter of fact, people will tell you, I don't want to do that. You know what I mean? Like, it's not even about options. Like, they'll be like, no. And I wasn't used to that.
Mm.
You know, because in the military, it's whether you agree or not, as long as it's legal, it's yes, sir, or yes, ma'am, or, you know, not, well, let me pray about it. Let me see what the Lord has to say. Right. So that was very difficult for me. And so I had to learn patience. I had to develop a new level of understanding and compassion, because this is not a, you know, just do this, do that, right? People are allowed to choose. They're allowed to make the decisions. And sometimes even when they do certain tasks, you know, they may not be done exact way you want or when you want. So it was a level of patience and compassion. And I had to kind of get out of that military mindset. And honestly, I'm still working on that today because again, I'm just naturally a get it done kind of person, you know, and I like things to be just in lock and step, you know, and it's just all working the way it's supposed to work. But, you know, in ministry, of course, and even outside of ministry, it doesn't work like that, you know, and we can hold people accountable, but it's just a different style in ministry than it is in the military. So it was definitely a challenge for me. Yeah.
When you first met your husband, did you know that he was called into ministry? I'm just curious about that.
Yeah. So he was a minister when we met. Big old comma. However, I did not know that he had the call of being a pastor on his life.
Okay.
So he was already he was a licensed minister in our church, and I was okay with that, but I did not know that there was another calling on his life. So I guess it was a good thing that I didn't know.
Oh, I love it. So tell us a little bit about how you serve alongside of him and how you have supported him and how he's supported you in your leadership. Because I know when you're a pastor's wife, sometimes there's expectations on you from the church, and sometimes your life doesn't look like the expectations. So I'm just curious how that's worked and how you guys support one another.
Sure. So that was one of the things you mentioned is word expectation, right? And that's a big word when it comes to being in leadership and especially being a pastor's wife, because entering into that role instantly, the weight of expectation falls on you, right? And there's no pastor's wives manual. I mean, I'm sure maybe you find something on Amazon, but really, you know, like there's no manual for how to operate, you know, in that. So one of the things that I had to learn and really allow God to help me do is get out of people's expectations. Because when you fall into that, and it's easy because of just the image that, you know, the church has created, especially around those of us who are pastors' wives, and the image that we have that we just, you know, look perfect all the time and perfect tea parties and all the everything perfect, right? So I had to recognize that I cannot allow myself to get into other people's expectations, because then I'm not operating in my gift. I'm not operating in God's grace, but I'm just trying to meet people's standards, which means there's always going to be anxiety. There's always going to be this level of insecurity and disappointment, because we can't please people, and nor should we try, right? Because they're people, right?
Right.
You can make them happy one day and the next day they're not happy with what you did, right? So because we're people, we change, you know? And so it was not being in other people's expectation and really just allowing God to be the one who leads me and just put all of the expectation on him. Because I'm like, I didn't know that I was going to be called into this, but I'm here now, right? I'm here now. So God, you are going to have to help me. So I put the expectation on him and I took the weight off of myself.
Can you talk to us about the transition of serving only in the church world to starting your own business?
Yeah, so interesting. Like one of the things I knew that God had called me to was entrepreneurship. I had the spirit of entrepreneurship since I was in high school. I was selling Avon, you know. So I was always just had that spirit of, wanting to have a business. When I realized just a few years ago is that I wanted to take that entrepreneurial spirit outside of the church walls, because I knew that I was meant to impact women on a larger scale, and in a greater way. And also because I knew that God had given me a voice, He had given me gifts, and that I could not allow them to be confined. So, and also, in all honesty, it allows me to be able to serve women in my gift through entrepreneurship in a more flexible way, right? So I didn't want to do everything under the auspices of ministry. I didn't want to brand myself as a pastor's wife and just be known as a pastor's wife who has a business. I wanted to have my own thing, and be known for who God called me to be and what He made me to be, and show up as that. So I knew that I had to take my business outside of the church and do it in the online marketplace. And I also have desires to take it, offline as well. So that was basically the transition, was just knowing that what God had given me was not just for the people that was within my circle. So He had called me to a larger stage of influence. And so I was just ready to move with that.
Love that. So you just talked about your desire to help women uncover their gifts and use their gifts. So can you talk to us a little bit about what that looks like? What do you do with women who are unsure what their gifts are? Like where could somebody start if they're in that place of really not knowing?
Yeah, so it starts out, of course, with a lot of conversation. God has gifted me to be able to see people's potential and see what they don't see, to hear the things that they're speaking that they don't hear. He's just given me that discerning ear. So when I talk to women, when I'm speaking to women and teaching to women, because God has given everybody a gift, He's given everyone a purpose that He wants to be carried out on the earth. He's giving it to us all. And it's just a matter of that being awakened within us. And for some, we are at a place in our life where God awakens it in us. And then for some of us, He has to put people in our life to make that awakening happen. Right. And so that's where I come in, is I'm that person that God uses to help make that awakening come alive inside of them. Because what I find is that there are women who they have a desire, but they don't understand what's already inside of them and how the desire and the gift has to come together to understand what has God called you and purposed you to do. The desire is not coincidental, and we know the purpose is not coincidental. And it's helping women understand, how do we get down to the root of what is the desire that you have, and what are those gifts, those talents, what is that expertise, what is that, what I call that DNA, your distinct natural ability that God has placed inside of you that we have to bring together, so then you can start bringing that into the online marketplace or offline marketplace, whatever where their heart lies. So it's bringing those two divine entities within us together, and then helping them translate that into a business, and knowing what that should look like, and understanding what is the vision for that. How is that vision going to be executed? So giving them clarity on that, who they are, their heart's desires, and then bringing that to life through having a vision, having a plan, having a strategy, and most of all, having full certainty that this is what I know God has created me to do. And then allowing them to realize that you don't have to ever look anywhere else to what any other woman is doing, because as long as you are standing in your gift, what God has called you to do, using the voice God has given you, when you are always connected to the desire and the gift and keeping those two together and honoring that and staying focused in that, then there's no failure. There's no failure. You don't have to compare, because God has already given it to you, and it's not going to look, like anyone else. And it's also helping them realize that just because what you see other people doing, whether online or offline, don't let that be the canvas in which your life and your business has to be painted. Don't allow other people's canvas to determine what your masterpiece is. It's your masterpiece, and it's for you to bring that masterpiece to life, right? If we're the painter, and we know, and God knows because he put it inside of us, what those paint strokes are supposed to mean. And so when we can really bring life into that masterpiece, then we don't have to worry about, well, why is she doing it that way and I'm doing it this way? All that, it's like, it's unnecessary. And it takes us out of our lane.
Breshana, you speak from such a place of confidence in yourself and in your gifts. How did you learn that, or where were you able to find that confidence to be able to speak into other women's lives, to be so settled in your own gifts that you could share with them?
Yeah, that's a great question. It took a while because I was not always confident. I wasn't always secure. I started out very insecure, very self-conscious, because again, just the weight of expectation. I think once I got to the point of just feeling frustrated and asking why, going to God and just like, why this and why that, just really, we all come to that point in our lives. And for some, it takes a while, and we get there in different ways. For me, it was just being a little bit frustrated, in all honesty, and realizing that I was the source, I was the cause of my own frustration. It wasn't the strategy. It wasn't any of that. It was just, I was the source of my own frustration. And so in order to get out of that, I had to step outside of myself and just say, okay, God, you made me this way, as awkward as I may feel sometimes. Like, you made me this way for a reason, and who I am, who he made me to be, is for someone else. Like, I'm not for everybody else. So one, it was realizing that I can't help everybody. Even as a pastor's wife, I cannot help everybody. That's not my assignment, is to help everybody. So stepping outside of that, and then knowing that there are specific people, and I don't know all of who they are, but I do know that whatever partnerships, and this is where the point of actualization had to come to, is that I know that whatever partnerships God has ordained or destined for me to have, those are the people that I want to connect with. Those are the people who are ready to receive what it is that I have to offer in the way that I do it. And be confident with that, and not worry about, well, what if, I say this or do that it's not going to resonate with the right person. Well, then it's not the right person. Right. And just knowing that if God made me the way he made me, he gave me the voice he gave me. He gave me the gifts he made me. And even how I communicate, how I push women in their purpose and push them in their gifts, and how I lead them, that I know that there are specific women who need it just the way he put it in me. It's just like the painting, right? With the masterpiece painting. We see these paintings that have like very abstract, paint strokes. And to one person, they're like, I don't get it. Makes no sense to me. I don't want it. And to another person, they're like, it speaks to me. I get it. I want it. right? And they see the value in it.
Yeah.
And so they buy it. And so that's how we have to see ourselves, is that I'm that masterpiece that maybe one person may not quite understand the brush strokes that God has made me to be. But the brush strokes that I am, it's for somebody, right? And so when we get clear on who God made us to be and who we are, and recognize that even with our flaws, He's constantly working on us. And I am where I need to be right now. I don't need anything else to do what God has called me to do right now, you know? And when we can stand in that and recognize, the Bible says that God says, I've given you everything you need pertaining to life. I've given it to you. And I used to think I was lacking. I used to have that scarcity mindset, and not scarcity from a materialistic standpoint, scarcity from an internal value. There's something missing in me. Maybe I'm not mature enough in my gifts. Maybe I'm not as good of a teacher as I should be. I had that scarcity factor on the inside. But when the Bible says, I've given you everything, then I'm like, then, okay, the disconnect is that I have to get out of my own head. If it says I've given you everything you need, then why am I sitting here thinking I'm not good enough? Or why am I thinking I need to be a better teacher? Why do I think I need to have more gifts and more of whatever? No, He says you have what you need. So I had to get out of the mindset that I didn't have enough or that I wasn't enough, that I am enough for where I am right now to do what God has called me to do. The seeds He placed inside of me needs me right now, not me 5 years from now. The seeds need my tending to right now. Right. And so that's the clarity. That was the confidence. That was the certainty. And knowing that it's not going to be perfect, because we're work in progress. We are success in progress. We are constantly in progress. So if I know that I'm just in progress, then I just have to do what I need to do, because the seed will only grow. It will only grow if I do what I'm supposed to do with that. And as I do it, I get better. I get stronger. I become more clear. I get more confident, because all that comes through experience. It comes through taking action. It comes through taking risks in our business. That's where the growth comes. The growth doesn't come from just sitting, thinking, wondering, hoping, and it doesn't come from there. It just comes from, you know what, God, I'm going to take the step. I'm just going to take that one step, and God will honor that one step, because that's our faith in action. So we can God will honor that one step. He'll help us. He'll help us. And so that's how I've just been able to really speak from the place that I am. But it really took some getting out of myself and just allowing God to really work on me, and then really believing, and I mean wholeheartedly believing, and key point, receiving what the word says, because sometimes we know it and we believe it, but we haven't received it, so that the seeds that are in us get watered and nurtured by His word. So I had to receive it, because I knew it, but I wasn't allowing it to take root inside of me so that those seeds could grow. So that's how I'm able to speak from the place I do now. I can't take credit for it, honestly.
I feel like that's just like such a powerful lesson for every leader, that like everything you just said, if don't take anything else from this, just go back and re-listen to that like 5 times. So can you tell us, do you find anything that trips women up from discovering their gifts? Like, is there anything that you find to be common stumbling blocks for women to accepting their gifts or embracing their gifts?
Yeah. So one of the things I think is a stumbling block is that they just think that no one will value it because of perception, right? we preconceive our own giants, right? We create them. We create our own giants, and then we form conclusions based off of the perception we've created. And so then we don't take action. And so it's the stumbling block is usually the perception that's not really substantiated because they haven't even started, right? So it's just a perception that they try to use as a determining factor as to, will this succeed? Will people believe me? Will people value me? Will they receive me? It's all of these things around perception. And I will also say acceptance, because no one wants to, like, they say, oh, put myself out there. I have to put myself out there. And we hear that term a lot, of putting ourselves out there. And that stumbling block with that is like, if I put myself out there, what will people think? Again, so that's the perception and the need, the desire to be accepted. And the thing is, what does it matter? What does it matter anyway? Like if God has called you to this, and you know that this is what you can do, this is how God has blessed you in order to serve other women, there are women who need it. There are other women who need it. And so it's helping them come out of perception and the need to be accepted.
So good. I just love all of the really great nuggets that you're sharing. These are just fantastic for our listeners.
That's awesome. So, Breshana, what I love about you and what you're doing is that you just are working, you're serving in your church, you're raising your kids, and everything I've seen from you online, it just seems like you're doing it all with grace. And maybe it doesn't always feel that way, but from the outside looking in, that's how I perceive it. So talking about perceptions. But I know that it takes habits and routines and structure to manage all these different things that you have going on. So can you tell us a little bit just about kind of how you manage your time and be able to fulfill these different roles that you have in your life?
Sure. So first, thankfully, I have to thank God for this, is that I have a career that's very flexible. So, and it wasn't always like that, but having a very flexible career is a big part of it. It allows me to really kind of create my schedule in a way that suits me. So I know some women don't have that option. So for me, that's what it is having a flexible career. Outside of that is also my kids, which is a big thing, of course, is making sure that they're very clear on what's happening, because kids need structure. And, they have their things going on to extracurricular activities and things like that. So it's really just kind of forcing, okay, I try to look at my calendar and say, okay, I'm going to look at 2 weeks out, because things come up, things just happen. And I realize that I have to look at my calendar at least 2 weeks out to see, because I plan ahead of time, but then I have to kind of do that in between spot check to say, okay, do I need to rearrange something because whatever came up? So I try to get ahead of those things as much as I possibly can and make it very clear to my kids, here's the game plan, right? I have to tell them, here's the game plan, because I have this going on, you have that going on, so here's how we're going to operate. And so I have to constantly just make sure that they have the structure and the boundaries in place so that they have what they need to thrive, and then I have what I need to thrive. Also, waking up really early, because it just helps, to get those things done. And also there's times when I am up a little bit late, and I try to manage that. I don't like to do it often, but I do recognize that there's times when maybe I have to burn a midnight oil, either because there's a lesson that I need to spend time in, or there's just some tasks that I know I need to focus on, because maybe later in the week, I'm not going to have as much time for these bigger chunks, of things. And then managing the home, I had to get a house cleaner, to take some of those things off. And believe it or not, like, I don't have her on a regular basis. It's more of like just when I just really don't feel like it.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, like, we all chip in and keep the house clean. We do it together. And asking for help as well, which can be a big thing, for us women who are high achievers and, we like to get it done, is knowing that, we have to be willing to ask for help and not, carry the weight on our own, especially when we have a partner who God has, given to us, blessed us with, who can bear some of that. So doing that as well. And really just not having a gotta get it all done attitude. As much as I want to get it all done, I try to keep in mind, like, just do what God would have you to focus on for today. Because what I have learned is that when we say yes to what God is assigning us to do, as much as we may feel like we don't have time, because we hear that a lot, that's kind of that kind of language is vibrating out on the internet space. I don't have time, right? And we talk a lot about time management. And I kind of sort of, but I have somewhat of a different perspective of that. And for me, it's really not time management, it's work management. It's self-leadership. And 2, it's surrendering. And what I've learned is that if and when I say yes to the things that God has assigned for me to do that day, that He'll make room in my schedule for everything else to fall into place. But we say we don't have time is because sometimes we're not saying yes to the right things. And we teach people, say no. Say no, say no, say no. Mm-hmm. But no one's teaching people to say, can you say yes to God first? Because when you give Him the yes, He'll work it all out. But we put these constraints on ourselves because we have not said yes to the right things or the right person. Mm. And we believe the answer is to say no to other people and yes to ourselves. But then we overlook, what about saying yes to God? Mm-hmm. If we say yes to God, do you trust Him enough? He already knows what's going on. Do you trust Him enough that He will work your schedule out where you are not stressed, that you don't have anxiety? He'll work that out. And so I learned this whole management thing in a different kind of way, because when I wasn't really saying yes, it was like, oh, I got all these things I got to do. I got to do this, and do that. And I'm stressed. Oh, I need a time management class. I need someone to help me. It's like, no, what you need to do is, the Bible says, come and learn of me. He tells us, if you are heavy laden, you are burdened, take my yoke upon me and come learn of me. He didn't say yes to yourself. He didn't say no to other people. He said, come learn of me, and then I will give you rest for your soul. And so my yes has to be in Him in order to get the rest that I need, so that I'm not stressed and I'm not in anxiety. And I trust God with my schedule enough that He's not going to stress me out. He's not going to stress us out. That's not the will of God for our life, is to be a stressed out leader. That's not His will for us. That's not his plan for us. He says, I want you to prosper. I want you to prosper and be in good health. And stress is not a healthy thing. Mm-mm. So when we find ourselves in these stressed out places, then the question is, well, why am I stressed? And what is it that I'm not yielding myself to that's creating this stress? Because stress does not come from God. It comes from other things. I had to learn how to yield to what God is telling me to do. Mm-hmm. And then I know that everything else will fall into place. Yeah.
No, I love that answer. Don't worry about being long-winded. We want to hear what you have to say. No, I think that is such a great conversation to have, because I don't know about you, but I find when I'm not saying yes to God and yes to what He's having me do right where I'm at, that's when guilt comes in. The guilt about, not doing the best for my family, or not doing the best for my business, or not doing the best for whatever ministry or whatever my things are. And that's when that guilt comes in, and it just lays so heavy on you. And, as you were mentioning, like, Jesus says that his yoke is easy and his burden is light. And it's so true. When you are actually saying yes to the things that he wants you to do, you're absolutely right. He helps you. He either works it out so that your schedule just happens to work out, or he gives you the ability to, prioritize the things that he wants you to prioritize so that his purposes in your life can get fulfilled. So I think it's such a good conversation. And I think perhaps maybe if you find that you're having huge loads of guilt, that's a great time to check what you're saying yes to and what your priorities are. So
one of the things that I didn't mention, I'm also in Bible college, like just another thing that it's not another thing, but but I'm in Bible college as well, and I'm pursuing my doctorate in biblical counseling. Now, anyone would say, what in the world? Like, how do you have time? And when I made that decision, I didn't make the decision with, am I going to have enough time? I knew that this was God was telling me I had to do. I knew that if I did not say yes to this, my entire life would not be right. I knew that if I say yes to this, I'm not worried about all of the other things, because God is calling me to this. And he's already worked it out anyway. He's the author and finisher of our faith. He knows the end before the beginning. So there's no need for me to stress, like, how am I going to find time? It's like, no, I just have to say yes. And then let God work out the rest. Again, it's putting the expectation on him, And so it's something that I think we as women, Christian women, is that we have to really, lean to how the Bible is telling us how we should be managing our time. And it really just boils down to how we respond to what God is saying. That's how we manage our time. What is God saying?
Yeah.
It's a powerful lesson that we can learn. And I think I need to remind myself of that every day. So put a big Post-it note or something when I wake up about, how does God want me to use my time today?
Yeah, definitely.
So, Breshana, we're getting close to wrapping up, and I just appreciate everything you've shared so far. But I'd love to hear, what would be your advice for a younger leader? I think some of our listeners are maybe at the beginning phase of their ministry or their career or their business world life. What would you tell her just starting out in that phase of her life and leadership?
Yeah, so the first thing I think I would tell them is, one is, don't lead alone, because we're not know-it-alls. Just because we're a leader doesn't mean we know it all. We've just been called into a different capacity in which we show up, whether it's on our job, our career, and our ministry, and our business. We're just called to show up in a different capacity than someone else. And so it's important, I would say, to not lead alone, because the Bible tells us that, I wrote it down, that in a multitude of counselors, there's safety. And so, and even for those who are seasoned leaders, we should never really be leading alone, because we get inside of our own heads. But definitely in the early phases is to don't lead alone, and then be teachable. Be teachable, most definitely. Leaders can be taught, even by the people they lead. And sometimes God places people in our circle to teach us a lesson so that we can become better leaders.
Mm.
And so it's not having, conceit, being conceited, or, thinking like, oh, I'm so great, because none of us are that great. There's always somebody better, but not lead alone, and be teachable. Be teachable by other people in your circle, as well as those who you're leading, because God has placed all of them in your life for a reason, and I would say just be willing to go against the grain, and be okay. Two things, actually. Be okay with people not always agreeing with your decisions, because it's not always for them to agree. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in that position they're in now.
Mm-hmm.
And not conceding to other people's decisions just because you want to be liked, you want to be accepted, or popular, whatever. One thing that I know is that as a leader is that it doesn't matter what people say about you when you're around, is what they say about you when you're not around, which you will never know, right? So, but it's true. It's very true, because even it happened with Jesus and Peter. Peter was like, I love you. He was like, you're going to act like you don't even know me when things hit the fan, and we saw that to be true. And so if we keep that in mind, and not depend on people to be the gauge as to how well you are performing, because sometimes they'll like what you're doing and sometimes they won't. But as long as you know that you're leading with grace, not within and of yourself, but with grace in what God has called you to do, then you just have to trust that. And no, you make mistakes. I mean, mistakes will happen, and be okay, and be transparent enough to know when you make a mistake. I know in the early, stages of leadership, we want to do it right because we don't want to mess up. And then you mess up, you don't want to really admit like just how big of a mess up it is. But that's leadership. Hey, you know what? I should have did this. Hey, you were right. Being transparent, being humble, being teachable, and not doing it alone. I would say those are the things.
Those are great. So on the podcast, we believe that leaders are learners, and to really lead and continue to grow as a leader, we need to be ever learning. So I'm interested, what have you been learning or reading or listening to lately?
Sure. So like I said, I'm in Bible college, so I'm always studying, always studying. But so right now, what I'm learning, or the lessons that I've been kind of digging into, is from a ministry standpoint, is offense, because offense is big. It's a huge thing that people don't know how to deal with. So I'm studying offense right now, and there's 2 books that I'm reading right now. So one of them is called "What Do You Think of Me, and Why Do I Care?" So it's a really great book. It's a really good book, because it talks about perfection and wanting to be accepted, and not in risking rejection, basically. And that's a big thing. We see that even in the online space, and for entrepreneurs, is, attraction and repelling people. And repelling is just someone rejecting you, what it is you have to say, or your personality. And so I'm reading that as well. I love to listen to podcasts, of course. I love reading books, because I am a learner at heart, because I'm a teacher by nature. So I love to learn. And then there's another book called Stop Playing Safe, which I'm reading it again. Actually, I read it many years ago, and I had to pull it out of my library and start reading it again, just because of where God is pushing me. So, and it's really just about taking those bold steps and being clear on what those bold steps can look like, and what are those plans of action you can have when you're taking those risks, and also recognizing what are the consequences when you do play safe.
Mm.
When you have a vision, and when you have this desire, and you are playing safe, then that's also risk too. But what are you risking? What are you sacrificing when you are playing safe? And what are the rewards when you are choosing not to play safe? So those are the things that I'm learning, and it's been great. I've really been enjoying it so far. Yeah.
That's awesome. We'll get the links for those books and put them in the show notes for folks so they can check those out. So, Breshana, we want to thank you for spending the time with us today on the podcast. And we'd love to know, for any listener that wants to connect with you, what's the best way for her to connect with you? And if you have something you want to give away or share with the audience, feel free to let us know about that too.
Sure. So the easiest way to connect with me is on Facebook. That's where I am most of the time. If they're on social media, my handle is simple. It's my name, Breshana Miller. So nothing clever or creative or anything like that. You can find me on Facebook. So Messenger is fine. And then my website, simply BreshanaMiller.com. So you can find me there as well. So either way, I check my email, I check my Messenger. So if anyone wants to ever get in touch with me, that would be the easiest way to do it. And as far as just connecting with me deeper, is I have a Facebook group where I spend time there, nurturing the women, and really teaching in that group, with helping them get clear and deeper into their purpose, and how they can use their gifts and their strengths to do what God has called them to do. So they can also come out and join my Facebook group, where we can get connected and really start to, be that catalyst for what it is that they want to bring into this world. So you can find me in my Facebook group too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Breshana, for spending the time with us today and sharing about how God has worked in your life and how you're impacting others through your leadership. So we appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Esther. Thank you, Holly. I so appreciate it. It's been a joy. I've had a blast. And I hope that all of this was helpful to your audience as well. And so thanks a lot. It was great being here.
Thanks for joining us on the Christian Women Leadership Podcast. Do you want to become a more confident leader? Then make sure to grab the Confident Leader Manifesto. This is a resource that Holly and I developed just for you, and I share all about it in episode 6, Leading with Confidence. You can get the manifesto for yourself at estherlittlefield.com/confident. And that's confident with a T. Now, don't forget, your leadership matters, and it's time for you to embrace your gifts and lead with confidence.